Hi everyone. Right, with the permission of Mr. Angus himself, speaking to him last night, I want to attempt to explain what the booking field generator is, what happens, but also its companion, so to speak, the G field generator. So, let's start off. For demonstration purposes, this is going to be extremely difficult. Right, let's assume these are the two coils we're going to use. Right, on them, well, you can't. As you can see, I've drawn arrows on each side. Right, this indicates the direction of winding for the coils themselves. Simple, cheap and dirty. I wasn't going to spend ages actually winding wire on, and besides you wouldn't be able to see in the video which way it was wound anyway. So that's that. To demonstrate his U-shaped core, I'm going to use one of these. It's a U-shaped bolt. Right, and I didn't actually grab one, but I will if I can see it somewhere. Where's it gone? That is a magnet similar to what Mr. Angus is using. Get off. So, put that down. On both setups, both the booking field and the G field, the magnet, god darn it, sits in between the metal cores. Flip it over. Just like that. Come on. There we go. Right. So, I've drawn it on this piece of paper. And it probably actually is better if I take that off. That's a bit better. Right. So, let's draw in the magnet, shall we? Can you see that? Yes, wonderful. I'll just shade it in. Might just be able to see it a bit better if I do it that way. Yes, you can. Wonderful. Okay. Right. One side of this magnet is north. The other one is south. Sorry, I know it's upside down. Well, actually, given that it's N and an S, it probably doesn't matter. Anyway, right. First of all, we need to explain what the flux field does. Right. This is the path of the magnetic field from north to south, which is how we all think of it. Basically, damn it, get out of the shadow. Basically, goes from the north side here, where my pencil is. It curves around, darn it. It curves around the side of the magnet around to the south. So it makes like a donut around the magnet. Regardless of what the shape of the magnet is, however, different shaped magnets can produce some interesting fields around them. But we're not going to go into that, that gets extremely complicated. So what happens here, right, is the path of, magnetically speaking, least resistance is to go from the north side into the iron, around the iron, or steel in this case, but never mind, and out from the bottom side back to the magnet. Yes, there's still some that leaks around a little bit around the sides of the magnets, but that depends on the gap between the magnets and the steel. So, if we draw it on here as a pathing, goes that way, and that way. Yeah, I think you can see them. Worst case scenario is I'll pick my webcam up later and show you. You should be able to see it. Anyway, so that is the field. It comes around, constantly comes around. However, yes, there's changes in how the field functions as the go away, as the magnet enters and leaves the core. But for the time being, we're going to leave that out because that gets very complicated. So, we'll start with the booking field generator because that's the most complicated. Yes, I can let your brains explode later on. Okay, in order to understand how the booking field generator works, first of all you need to know the left and right hand rules. Do a search on YouTube for left hand rule and another one for right hand rule. It's the rule that governs the flux fields around a coil. Basically use your hands to determine coil windings and flux direction, etc, etc. And there's also some other funky stuff, but again, I'm not going to go into that because it gets complicated. Now, what we've drawn here is two representations of the coils side on. You've got their cores in there. So we're looking at it from this end. Really? I've not replied to you and you're still messaging me? Anyway, so we're looking at it from that end. The magnet's here, the other end of the coils. And so we're looking at it end on there. Or if we say 3 messages, come on. So if we look at it from here, we're looking at it from this end coming in. Okay, I hope everyone's got how we're looking at the field. Right, so left and right hand rule here. Right, if we're looking at it from this direction, right, the flux field in each coil is in opposite directions. So if we go to here, on this one, yes, that one, right, the flux field that comes through the centre of the core is coming up the page towards us. Okay, in this one it's going down through the page. Straight in so you can see the cores. Okay, so the two fields are in opposite directions. Right, left or right hand rule, depending on whether you want to think of the circuit as voltage flow from positive to negative, or whether you're thinking of a circuit as electron flow from negative to positive. Depends on which rule that you use. But as a general rule, the actual direction of windings is only relevant to each other because there's a full wave bridge rectifier on this. So in this case, right, those two coils have to be, to create a booking field, right, they have to be in opposite directions as you're looking at them end on. So one goes that way, one goes that way. One goes clockwise, the other one goes anti-clockwise. Hopefully everyone gets that after they've watched those two videos for the left and right hand rules. If not, message me and, well, I'll try and explain it again. So on the core here, yeah, cheap and dirty, I know. Oh, well, I've gone over my line, but never mind. We'll just draw this in as a shaded area. Yeah. My drawings are always wacky. We'll stick another one on there. Simple representation of where the two coils sit. Okay, so as you can see here, looking down on it now, you can still see that the flux field flows in opposite directions through the cores of those two coils. So you have these two coils wound in opposite directions, right? So when you do that, you can literally take the start and ends of these two coils here. Yep, you can see that. Right, you can literally connect them together like that, and then bring those two off into a full wave bridge rectifier. Okay, what happens is, this is where we start melting people's brains. Okay, the flux field goes that way round. Yeah, always that way round. Right, that is what's caused by the magnet itself. However, because of lenz, which you can't escape from, this first coil, right, creates a lenz field in the opposite direction. That way. That's basically what lenz is. Right, now, that's on its own. This one on its own will also try to create, can you see that? Oh, close. There we are, that's a bit better. Will also try to create a flux field in the opposite direction to fight the flux field from the magnet. Now, what happens is, on their own, right, this would just cause a standard lenz field in a generator and nothing new there, we've all been through it. However, because you've linked them there and because they are wound in opposite directions, what happens is the flux field comes in to this first coil, right, and initially passes through it, because you have to think of time as the fourth dimension here. Right, there is a lag on the lenz field, it's not instant. So initially you get a surge, so to speak, of flux field that comes round. Right, both of these coils then kick up and create a lenz field opposing the original flux field, which stops the lenz field. Right, because the lenz field has stopped, right, effectively it's gone backwards. Right, these two coils both produce separately still, right, produce a lenz field in the opposite direction of what has caused the flux field to change. So it's two opposites, which means that it's now coming back round again, but with even more force, because you've got the lenz fields from these two adding to it. Now, because that flux field has now started moving again, right, these two coils separately, right, generate a lenz field in the opposite direction to fight it. So what happens is it's constantly fighting the field from the magnet. It's oscillating basically. Now, when you pair them together, something very funky happens. I said to you, you've got to think of this as time and I mean it. This is where it gets complicated. A magnetic field, the flux field, is not instant from north to south. There is a slight lag, especially when it's being conducted through a medium. So what happens is, if you briefly think of the flux field as a wave, the wave emanates from the magnetic source, in this case a magnet, gets conducted up the core, nice and slowly round through that coil and then back round to south. So it takes time. What happens is, in a bucking field, it passes through the first coil, whichever one that is. Remember, the coils are now connected together and you've got a rectifier of them, right, which creates a voltage. Right. This is then fed into the second coil, which acts as a drive coil. Right. Because it is wound in the opposite direction, it creates a magnetic field as if it would, if it was on its own, a lenz. It creates its magnetic field in the opposite direction as if it would create a lenz field if it was connected on its own, right, which is then in the opposite direction, which then fights the original field that created it in this one. So basically, straight away, you've kind of created an amplifier. Right? Because of the time that it takes for it to, the lenz field to form, the magnetic field rather, to form here, and the time that it takes to cause the inductance in the first place, the flux field has already come round to here. What then happens is, this coil tries to fight it and pushes it back. This coil, here's the fun bit, this coil then does the opposite arrangement. Right? This one becomes, well, the trigger coil, or the generator coil, so to speak, and that one becomes the drive coil and tries to push it back round again. So what you then end up with is the flux field bouncing between the two cores, between the two coils. Now, because, as I keep saying to you, because of the time difference that it takes to set up the fields in the two coils, you then get some of that magnetic field flowing past the coils, which is where you get a difference in the waveforms from each of the coils, and you get output from the two coils. This is in a bucking field that you can then rectify and use. The key, perhaps coffee will help. Yes, better. The key here is that you've created an amplifier of sorts. So not only do you have the original magnetic field, but you have the additional magnetic fields caused by the two coils that are fighting each other. So it's constantly trying to shove the field in each direction, which basically amplifies what you're getting out of a standard coil, because it's alternating a lot quicker. That's why. Because it takes an alternating magnetic field to generate voltage, or should I say electron movement within the coil. So that's how the bucking field works. Rough, basic, simple. Anyone that knows properly how they work will see the faults in my explanation. My apologies, it's for those people that don't know. So now, somewhere on my desk is a rubber. It was in here, there it is. Okay, Now what we're going to do, let's use that corner. Right, get rid of that one as well. There are times when I wish I didn't do this in pencil. Yes, I know this video is coming up for 20 minutes. Sorry. Okay, hopefully that's rubbed out enough, perhaps. First of all, it can't see it, and now it sees it when I try and get rid of it. Great. Okay, G-field generator. Right. As I explained in the booking field, these two coils are wound in opposite directions. Right. In a G-field generator, they are both wound in the same direction. Right. So that basically the flux field is in the same direction? Yeah, same direction. So basically the two coils don't try and fight each other. They complement each other. They add to each other. Right? So you've still got them joined up. It's just they are wound in the same direction. Yes, you can cross their start and ends over and get the same effect, but for simplicity we're going to assume that they are wound differently. And besides, you can always flip a coil round. And I can show you. Drawn, actually we'll use this one, white on both sides. Drawn an arrow indicating the way that I've wound it. If we then spin this around, you can see the arrow on the other side. It's the same direction of wind physically, but it's now gone, well, on my screen it shows counterclockwise. Spin it around again, that's clockwise. So just by spinning a coil around, you can change its direction of wind. So in a G field, because these two are wound in the same direction, right, and depending on how you connect them here, either in parallel or series, right, most people would wind them in series. Right. Yes, it looks like I've done it in parallel, but trust me, that one's one connection, that one would be another. Right, so that's in series. They then add to each other voltage wise, as if you'd done a bigger coil, and hey presto, you get more voltage, but the coils themselves are a higher resistance. So what happens in that setup in a G field, yes, you get more voltage. Potentially, if you configure the coils right, you could actually get more wattage out of it. Tests show approximately 50 to 75% more power out of a coil if you use a G field setup. So if you use both sides of the magnets and conduct it round. However, you are still limited by the Lenz effect. But here's the kicker. Yes, you've increased the output of the coils by, let's say, 50% conservatively. Right? You also increased the Lenz field, which isn't increased by 50%. It's increased by more than that. The Lenz fields that generates on any coil is not linear. So the more power you generate in a coil, right, the more Lenz field gets generated, but it's not linear, it's logarithmic. So be aware of that. Now, the G field generator, so what, going back a step, hang on. So the lens field gets created in the opposite direction. So the first coil creates a field to come back. The second coil creates a field that complements the first one. Right. And hey presto, shoves it back out again. There are setups where you can get these two coils to pulse each other, but that gets extremely complicated, requires a specialist core, yada yada yada, and let's not go into that, because that would even give me a headache. I'm trying to think about it, and then trying to explain it in English. But so anyway, let's assume that doesn't exist. 25 minutes? Jesus. Okay, so on a G-field setup, we've discussed that the lens field complements each other from each coil. They don't fight. No, they don't. I know I said they do, they don't. And what you get is the opposite field. So when the magnet's approaching the U shape, right, this end gets energized with a north field, which fights the north field from the magnet, slowing the rotor down. When the magnet leaves the U, not only does that get generated with a north field, the opposite side gets generated with a south field. This is why it's not logarithmic. This is why it's not linear, which also fights the south field on the magnet. Double effect, slowing it down. When the magnet leaves the core, right, you get a south field generated here, because the flux disappears from the core, so it's in the wrong direction, the opposite direction from when it was induced by the magnet. So you then end up with a south field here, a north field there, and it tries to pull the magnet back to the core. Wonderful. Okay, so that's how, that also covers how lenz works as well. Now, there's more than one way to skin a cat. These two coils said wound in opposite directions. Right? You can have them wound in the same direction, right, and just cross the connections over. It makes almost the same result. I say almost. We're not going to go down that route. That would take me another half an hour to explain. Now, the interesting thing here is how your coils are wound. There are, strangely enough, multiple ways of winding coils. Excuse me, coffee again. Okay. Mr. Angus, in his interesting testing wisdom, let's put it that way, has wound, well, the two coils that I last saw were wound a bit haphazardly. It isn't efficient to do it that way. You can create all sorts of issues with having each wires crossing over each other like that. Again, think of the left and right hand rules. This one, assuming my pencil is a wire, generates, do it slow enough so the camera can update, a rotating magnetic field around it, which is a lenz field when you pull power out of it. Because these two are not at 90 degrees to each other, this wire creates an inductance in the other one, right, which, depending on what you're doing, right, will either generate a spike, a slight ripple spike coming out of the coil, or it'll create a ripple trough in the voltage coming out. So basically it's noise. There is ways, being very careful what I say here, there are ways of crossing the wires so it benefits the system. Again, you have to know and understand the left and right hand rules in order to do this. That's all I'm going to say. So, if you were to wind them, for want of a better way of putting it, as Bedini does them, so there's your core. If you're looking through a cross section of the core, oops, I will shade this in a bit for you. Yeah, a little bit out of focus there. Try that. Oh no, that's even worse. That's weird. There you go. If you do it like that, where they are next to each other, nice and neat, yada yada yada, in some setups you can get a better output. Now, which is better? For a G field generator, right, doing it like that is definitely better. Right. However, a booking field is actually quite interesting. As I keep saying to people, you need to think of the fourth dimension as time. Right? Because your setups, your devices, your motors, whatever the hell they are, right, are in 3 dimensions. Well, they're in 4 actually. Not only you have time as well on top of that, because the rotor itself will change speed in time. Even if you just leave it alone and don't touch it, it changes speed. Right? If you're running from batteries, the batteries deplete, causes changing speed, yada yada yada. So you have to think of things in 4 dimensions. You have to think of things in 4 dimensions. How many times can I tell people this? Right? The lens field, right, is the key to a booking field generator. You have to balance between generating a strong lens field, right, which is the opposite to what most people want to do in free energy. You have to balance that with generating power output. Right, and that's what Angus is doing. I'm trying to explain this simply for everyone, sorry. So he's using a method of trial and error, which I've done it myself, works wonders, and you can quite often find interesting things that don't show up in math. And you can use math for this. That would take me a while to figure out, probably several weeks I think. I don't think myself or Vespa have any models for a booking field generator, so we'd probably end up having to basically program one from scratch. Now, one thing to bear in mind, Mr. Angus, as you're testing these coils, if you're winding them haphazardly, some will be wound more haphazardly than others, generating a slight variance in results. So if you're to wind 4 coils of the same core wire, assuming the wire is exactly identical, which it never is, each of the 4 coils will still have different characteristics because of how haphazardly they've been wound. If they are wound neatly like this one, right, they will all be identical, but that may not be what you want to do. However, having said that, I have seen some coils wound in a crisscross pattern going across them, so they are deliberately crossing each other. I believe one of Bedini's setups, multi-core setups, he actually twists the wire together before he winds them onto the coils. That effect is a similar thing to what you're doing when you haphazardly wind them, so you can get more power out, but in the terms of shall we say scientific methodology and eliminating variables, yeah, kind of the caveman approach there, which is what I expect, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. Angus isn't the only one that started off with a caveman approach. I've been in FE for 6 years, and the first 2 years I was pretty much doing exactly what Angus is doing with the kit Angus is doing, yada yada yada. So I have the utmost respect for Angus, and I hope everyone else does as well. I hope this video has explained things to people, and I've just realised it's 37 minutes, which is probably the longest video I've ever done. So hopefully that explains things. I hope that I've made the explanation simple enough so that everyone can understand it. If anyone has any questions about it, give me a holler. Please just comment away. I think that's about it. It's a huge area. As I said, try to explain it as simply as I can for people. Sorry about the inaccuracies, can't be helped. Give me a holler if you need any more information. Bye for now.